Okay, so cannabis stocks just had a day for the history books. We're talking a sector-wide explosion. Really, their best day ever. And it was all because of news that President Trump is signing an executive order to reclassify marijuana. But, and this is a big but, this is not full legalization. So what is actually changing? And why on earth did it send Wall Street into such a complete frenzy? All right, let's get into it.
And hey, just a quick reminder before we get started. This is all for educational purposes. It is not financial advice.
So let's set the scene here. The story broke late Thursday, got confirmed on Friday, and the market's reaction was, well, it was immediate and totally historic. Seriously, this was not just another good day. This was a massive moment of validation for a $32 billion industry that's been stuck in this legal gray area for, decades.
I mean, just look at the numbers here. The sheer scale is wild. Tilray brands, boom, up 44%. Canopy Growth, a staggering 52%. And the main cannabis ETF, CNBS, which basically tracks the entire sector, jumped over 54% in a single day. That's the kind of insane movement you almost never see.
So why did this all happen? It's because of this expected executive order to reclassify marijuana. But here is the critical point, the thing that everybody seems to be missing: rescheduling is not the same thing as legalization. So to really get why investors are so incredibly excited, we have to dig in and break down what's actually going on under the surface.
So the whole thing comes down to the federal drug scheduling system. Marijuana is being moved from the most restrictive category possible, Schedule 1, all the way down to Schedule 3. Now, that might sound like a bunch of bureaucratic nonsense, but trust me, this is a seismic shift in federal policy.
And this right here really shows you how absurd the old system was. For 50 years, federal law put marijuana in the exact same box as heroin and LSD. These are drugs with, and I'm quoting here, no accepted medical use. This reclassification finally moves it down to Schedule 3, where it belongs, alongside things like ketamine, steroids, and Tylenol with codeine. Things that are actually recognized as having legitimate medical uses.
So here's the bottom line. What this change is a formal admission by the U.S. government that marijuana has medical value. That's huge. What it is not is full federal legalization. It's still going to be a federally controlled substance, it's just going to have a whole new set of rules, and those new rules are what have the entire industry buzzing.
And that brings us to the single biggest reason for that insane stock market rally: the death of a totally crippling tax rule known as Section 280E. This, right here, is the real game changer. Okay, so Section 280E of the tax code, it was basically designed to punish drug traffickers. Since marijuana was a Schedule 1 substance, any state legal cannabis business was technically trafficking. And that meant they were forbidden from deducting normal, everyday business expenses. We're talking rent, salaries, utilities, marketing, the basic costs of running literally any other company in America.
Look at how this breaks down. A normal company makes $1 million in revenue, has $800,000 in expenses, they pay tax on their $200,000 profit. Makes sense, right? Well, a cannabis company, thanks to 280E, pays taxes on its entire $1 million in revenue. This has led to effective tax rates of 70, 80, even 90%. It has absolutely crushed otherwise profitable businesses.
So by moving marijuana to Schedule 3, poof, Section 280E just doesn't apply anymore. This one change is estimated to save the industry somewhere between $1.5 to $2 billion a year. Overnight, these companies could see their profits jump by 40 or 50% without changing a single other thing about how they operate.
And the benefits go way beyond just taxes. Banks have pretty much refused to touch cannabis companies because of their federal status. Rescheduling opens that door to normal banking. We're talking loans, credit card processing, and finally getting away from the risks of being a cash-only business. It also unleashes a massive wave of medical research because universities and pharma companies can finally conduct the rigorous clinical trials needed to develop new medicines.
But while all the small operators are celebrating, there's another group that's been quietly getting ready for this exact moment for years: Big Pharma. And their playbook really shows the strategic, corporate reality that's hiding behind this policy change.
Yeah, this is not a new game for them at all. These pharmaceutical giants have been making chess moves for years. Pfizer bought a company called Arena Pharma just for its cannabinoid drug pipeline. Jazz Pharma spent over $7 billion to buy GW Pharma, which makes the only FDA-approved CBD drug. See, they haven't been waiting on the sidelines. They've been methodically building the infrastructure to completely dominate this space.
Their strategy is crystal clear. Step 1, file aggressive patents on everything you can think of. Step 2, just buy up the smaller companies that have already done the hard work of getting drugs through the FDA. And Step 3, use your massive lobbying machine to shape all the new rules. The long-term risk here? A future where cannabis is less about your local dispensary and way more about patented prescription-only drugs that squeeze out the pioneers who built this industry in the first place.
Okay, so with all this excitement, it's so important to read the fine print. We've talked about what rescheduling does, but it's just as important to be super clear on what it doesn't do.
So despite the change, marijuana is still federally illegal in a lot of really key ways. You still can't transport it across state lines. A TSA agent at the airport can still seize it. Federal employees are absolutely still prohibited from using it. And really significant immigration consequences for non-citizens, those are all still firmly in place. This is tax and research reform. It is not a get-out-of-jail-free card.
And that brings us to our final and maybe most crucial section, a really sobering reality check about the risks and the very long road that is still ahead for this industry.
See, the market rallied on the expectation of this change, but the reality is a much slower process. After the order is signed, the DEA kicks off a formal rulemaking process. That means public comment periods, hearings. It's a procedure that's going to take at least 6 months and probably a lot longer. We're not expecting full implementation until 2026 at the earliest.
And the risks definitely don't stop there. This sector is famous for being volatile. A 50% rally can literally vanish overnight. A lot of these companies are still deeply unprofitable, and just getting tax relief isn't going to solve their fundamental business problems, like market oversupply. And finally, there is huge political uncertainty. This executive order could easily be challenged in court, or even just reversed by the next administration.
So if you boil it all down, here is the ultimate takeaway. Rescheduling isn't legalization. It's really the government just finally admitting that marijuana isn't the same as heroin while making sure they still keep tight control. But for the actual businesses that have been struggling for years, that one single change in tax law, it is absolutely 100% game-changing.
And that leaves us with one final fascinating question. As this entire landscape fundamentally shifts, with a massive tax break for everyone and the corporate giants finally stepping onto the field, who is actually positioned to win in the long run? Is it going to be the original pioneers who built this entire industry from the ground up? Or will it be the pharmaceutical titans who've just been waiting for the perfect moment to play their hand?
That really is the billion-dollar question. To make sure you don't miss our next breakdown, go ahead and subscribe to Level Up Your Brain with the NoteMan.